Before Egypt raised its pyramids, before China crowned its emperors, there was Sumer. Here rose the first true cities where stone and clay became walls of power. They built temples that touched the heavens' stairways for gods to descend. Here they pressed the first words into clay, inventing writing itself. From far lands came stone, metal, and jewels, for Sumer was the heart of trade. Here were born the first laws, the rules that bound kings and commoners alike. They sang of Gilgamesh, the first epic hero carved in clay for eternity. From soil, stone, and spirit, Sumer forged the first civilization of mankind. Mesopotamia, literally the land between two rivers, was where Sumer was born. The rivers gave life, but they also brought chaos with floods sudden and fierce. Droughts struck without mercy, forcing Sumerians to invent new ways to survive. With little stone or timber, they turned to clay molding cities from earth itself. By 4,500 BCE, small villages like Eridu began to dot the Mesopotamian plain. Eridu became one of the world's first sacred centers where gods were called to earth. Out of hardship came genius irrigation that turned deserts into harvests. With water and toil, their fields yielded barley, the bread and beer of Sumer. The marshes offered reeds for houses, boats, and tools, sustaining early life. They tamed goats and sheep, securing wool, milk, and meat for their growing towns. With clay abundant, they became master potters, shaping jars to store grain and beer. Villages grew and multiplied, spreading across the fertile land of the two rivers. Scarcity bred conflict, neighbors clashed for control of life-giving waters. Yet cooperation built their strength as they carved canals that fed entire cities. From scattered huts grew towns, and from towns rose the first great cities. In this land of hardship and abundance, the spark of civilization was lit. Sumer was born. Dozens of city-states rose, Uruk, Lagash, Kish, each a kingdom in miniature. Uruk's walls stretched for miles, shielding over 50,000 souls within. Each city was ruled not only by kings but by councils of wise elders. The Lugal, the great man, was both warrior and judge, chosen to rule the city. Temples stood at the heart of politics. Priests spoke for the gods and for the city. Trade filled their streets, grain, wool, lapis lazuli, each city a hub of wealth. Kish rivaled Uruk, claiming supremacy among the Sumerian cities. Grew into a jewel of Sumer, rich in gold, lapis, and sacred temples. Every city kept its armies. War was constant between neighbors. But alliances were struck as often as wars, fragile peace sealed in clay contracts. Temples controlled the economy. Grain, livestock, and silver passed through their hands. Scribes gave law and trade permanence. Words pressed in clay carried royal power. Kingship itself was said to descend from heaven, legitimized by sacred rites. Disputes over water and land often sparked wars between neighbors. Cities armed themselves, preparing for the constant drumbeat of war. Warfare was almost constant. Cities clashed to claim dominance over Sumer. Victory brought land, wealth, and captives, fueling the ambitions of kings. After war, temples celebrated with feasts and offerings, thanking the gods for victory. No city ever ruled alone. Power shifted constantly among rivals and allies. Together, these city-states formed the mosaic of Sumer, the world's first civilization of cities. To the Sumerians, An was lord of the heavens, ruling over all the gods. Enlil, lord of wind and storm, could bless or destroy with a single breath. Inanna embodied love and war, gentle as the morning star, fierce as battle. Unpredictable floods and storms made the gods seem harsh and unforgiving. To calm divine wrath, priests offered sacrifices of lambs and grain. They raised ziggurats, stairways, for gods to descend from the heavens. The ziggurat was both temple and symbol of political might. Priests ascended daily, carrying prayers and offerings to the sky. At its summit, they met the gods with fire, oil, and sacred chants. Music and hymns filled the courtyards, binding gods and men in ritual. Grain, beer, and oil were given, sustaining both the temple and its gods. Priests sought omens in smoke and sacrifice, reading the will of the gods. The entire city gathered for festivals, carrying gifts to their gods. Temples kept records of every sacrifice, their scribes etching eternity in clay. Kings ruled not by might alone, but as chosen servants of the gods. Rituals ended in feasts where gods and people shared in abundance. Ziggurats were sacred fortresses guarded like palaces of kings. Dance, song, and sacrifice bound the Sumerians to their gods. High above the city, their prayers rose with smoke into the heavens. In Sumer, religion was power. Ziggurats stood as the beating heart of both faith and rule. From clay and reed was born Cuneiform, the world's first writing. Clay tablets tracked every sack of barley, every jar of beer, every trade. Here was inscribed the Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's first great story. The wheel turned Sumer's carts, potters' tables, and the course of history. With the plow, they fed thousands, turning soil into life. They fired mud into bricks, building walls that still stand after millennia. They devised the system of 60, giving us minutes, hours, and the circle. Law was written in clay, binding kings, merchants, and farmers alike. Seals and contracts secured trade trust, pressed in clay and stone. Taxes filled temple granaries, sustaining both gods and kings. They carved poetry into clay songs of gods, kings, and heroes. Music filled palaces and temples, the lyres of still sing across time. From lapis and gold, they crafted jewelry of dazzling beauty. Their art captured gods, beasts, and kings etched forever in stone. Cylinder seals carried signatures, art, and authority pressed into clay. They measured fields and built temples with the first mathematics. Watching heavens, they charted stars, foundations of astronomy. Trade was balanced with standardized weights of silver and grain. Their cities were planned with streets, drains, and neighborhoods. On rivers, reed boats carried goods far beyond Sumer. They wrote remedies on clay, blending magic with medicine. In tablet houses, children learned the sacred art of writing. From fire, they forged copper into weapons, tools, and art. They built the first chariots, oxen-drawn vehicles of war and ceremony. They discovered glazes and early glass, coloring the world anew. They mastered architecture, arches, columns, and towering halls of clay. On the royal standard of they told stories of war, peace, and power. From writing to wheels, from numbers to music, their genius built civilization itself. At the top of Sumerian society stood the Lugal, the great king. Priests shared power, guiding the city in the name of the gods. Nobles displayed wealth in jewels and robes dyed crimson or violet. Merchants linked Sumer to far lands India, Anatolia, and beyond. Craftsmen shaped clay, metal, and wood into the goods of daily life. Most Sumerians were farmers feeding the cities with barley and dates. Bread baked from barley was the staple of Sumerian tables. They brewed beer daily nutritious, safe to drink, and beloved by all. Some women rose high as priestesses, commanding respect and power. Others became merchants trading grain wool and gems across empires. At the bottom were slaves, war captives, and debtors, serving the powerful. Long caravans set out linking Sumer with India and Anatolia. Foreign traders brought beads, tin, and spices, enriching Sumer's markets. Daily life centered on family meals of bread, dates, and beer. Children played with clay toys, echoes of a simpler innocence. In tablet houses, students trained as scribes, keepers of knowledge. Education was strict. Scribes learned through long hours and discipline. Festivals brought joy, days of music, food, and shared devotion. In markets, food and drink flowed, celebrations binding community together. From kings to slaves, each played a role in the great tapestry of Sumer. Internal rivalries drained. Sumer neighbors clashed for land and water. Even councils split apart, their unity crumbling into discord. Centuries of irrigation left salt in the soil, choking the harvests. The walls of proud cities no longer held against new invaders. From the north came Sargon of Akkad, forging the world's first empire. Sumer's proud cities fell under Akkadian rule. Then came the Gutians, mountain tribes who shattered cities and farms. By 2000 BCE, mighty Ur collapsed under the weight of invasion and decay. The Amorites surged from the west, seizing Sumer's broken lands. Families fled their ruined homes, seeking safety in distant lands. Out of Sumer's ashes rose Babylon, inheriting its culture and power. Though cities fell, Sumer's knowledge endured, adopted by empires to come. Akkadian kings ruled vast lands, absorbing Sumer into their empire. The Gutians brought chaos, plunder without rebuilding. The Amorites laid the foundation for Babylon's greatness. Ur's fall was mourned in laments, voices of grief carved into song. Babylon preserved Sumer's gods, hymns, and sacred rituals. Sumer's stories endured, retold by Babylonian scribes for centuries. Assyria too inherited Sumer's legacy of kingship and war. Their mathematics lived on time, geometry, and astronomy. The law codes of Sumer inspired Hammurabi and rulers to come. Sumer's spirit flowed into Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria, never dying, only transformed. Even in new empires, ziggurats still towered as bridges to the divine. Though Sumer fell, its legacy endured, shaping the empires of Mesopotamia and the world. Sumer gave the world its first writing, cuneiform, etched in clay. Here were the first laws binding kings and commoners alike. They built the first true cities where stone and clay became civilization. The Epic of Gilgamesh became mankind's first great story. They gave us numbers 60 seconds, 60 minutes, the circle itself. They shaped the wheel, forever changing transport and war. Babylon carried Sumer's legacy, its gods, its laws, its wisdom. Assyria, too, inherited Sumer's script and traditions. Every empire that followed traced roots back to Sumer. Millennia later, their words still speak etched in clay for eternity. Sumer was the dawn of civilization, the spark that lit all others. Every empire, every city, every written word traces its roots back to the people of Sumer, the world's first civilization.